Right now I have Tony Thurmond here to my left. I'll take a brief moment to just introduce Tony to the audience. Tony Thurmond is a state assembly member of the Richmond District and has served the people of California for over 10 years in elected office. He's also a public school parent, a trained social worker, and a respected leader for nonprofits for youth with 12 years of experience in education. At every step, Tony has kept California kids as his top priority. Let's give him a warm welcome this afternoon to the CUE Conference. So thanks for being here, Tony. We're glad to have you. You have teachers and school administrators in the audience, and we are the folks who plan to use technology to support teaching and learning and assessment in our classrooms day in and day out as we work to educate the students in California. We're very interested this afternoon to hear both your vision for California public schools, but given that we're at the CUE Conference, specifically around integrating technology in the educational journey of our students. So let's just go ahead and get started, and why don't you tell us about your vision for California schools and what you'd like to accomplish as the state superintendent.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thank you all for the invitation. I know it must be a great conference because you're all here on a Saturday and doing what you do, preparing to support our students. My view is simple. Every young person can be successful, and education is a big part of that. And I think that educational technology is a great tool to help our students and our educators in supporting them. From my standpoint, we can use more education technology to prepare our students to be the workforce of tomorrow. There'll be 1.5 million jobs in technology fields in just a few years. At the rate that we are currently going, we would only have half the applicants to fill those jobs. And so throughout my time in the legislature and as a candidate, I've been talking about how do we expand our STEAM offerings and how do we provide more computer science throughout more districts in the state. And I think it's very important that we provide more professional development for our educators to be able to use the tools. In short, I'd say we need to have resources that our kids can use. We have areas in our state where young people don't have access to Wi-Fi at school or at home unless a truck with a mobile hotspot pulls up. And I think that puts them in a real disadvantage. I think we've got to ensure that our students, our educators have the tools they need, the training they need to help create the workforce of tomorrow.
Great. Well, thanks for identifying some ways that we could close the technology opportunity gaps, not only for our students, but also for the students, the teachers, and the administrators that serve.
It's true. You know, my 12-year-old said to me this week, Dad, I'm glad that we all have computers, but every day I hear my teacher say, I wish I had a computer that worked. To me, that's a serious disconnect.
Right.
And I think that we've got to make sure we're providing, you know, up-to-date modern technology for our educators and for our students.
Great. Well, as a local superintendent, I greatly appreciate that. What do you see as the role of the California Department of Education with help from other entities at the state level in helping schools plan and implement some of the effective application of some of the technology programs or technology orientation that you described?
You know, I think that the Department of Education has to play a major role around resource development and providing resources to school districts. You know, we've had so many unfunded mandates passed down to our school districts. And I've served as a school board member, and I know what that feels like when you're told that you have to, you know, create this new goal, but you have no resources to do that. You know, the days of saying that we expect educators to do more with less are over. We have to be really serious about funding education. They say you show your value by what you put in your budget. California currently ranks 46th in the nation in per pupil spending, even though we're the 5th wealthiest economy in the world. I think that we need to show that we value our kids and our educators by funding our schools in a way that gets us to being number one in this nation and what we invest in our schools. And that'll be my top priority as superintendent. It'll be my expectation that the Department of Education provides resources to our school districts, provides opportunities to connect and see best practices from other districts, gets technical assistance and support in how we introduce any curriculum or any new requirements that come down from the State Board of Education that say we align technology with our curriculum so that we don't have a disjointed system. And then here's the thing that I would offer that you may not hear all the time. I think the Department of Education has to listen to our educators. Too often,
applause, applause.
It's true. You know, too often I hear from educators who say, if we really implemented all the things that are passed down to us, we wouldn't have enough hours in any given day to get it done. And I think that we have to get past a place where legislators or others who aren't in the classroom are passing requirements for what students must do, should do. That should be informed and shaped by educators. And so the Department of Education needs to listen, take feedback to our customers, our clients, and that's school districts and educators. We should listen and shape policy. And I'll work to support making sure that educators are appointed to any decision-making body that gives the input to help shape what our curriculum looks like, what our training looks like, and what our technology roadmap looks like.
Great. Thanks, Tony. You're describing this need, sort of the local level and the local perspective, including the perspective of our front line, right? Our folks that are doing the work in the field. We know in Governor Brown's tenure, there's been a transformation of state standards, a transformation of assessment, and then, of course, the funding formula. Can you let us know a little bit and share your thoughts around LCFF, the local control funding formula, and how you would ensure that LCFF, the current model, or some other funding approach can help ensure that schools are assessing needs and how to get resources and services to every California classroom?
I'm a supporter of the local control funding formula, and I love that the LCAP says that local folks, parents, teachers, educators, and students get to give input. And we've worked to expand the LCFF funding this year. In the legislature, I co-authored a bill that will provide $300 million more to serve students who've been identified as the lowest performing students in our state. Having said that, LCFF has only restored us to where we were in 2008 funding levels.
That's right.
2008 was the first night I was sworn in on the school board, and we were in a recession. And there are people here who were there with me that night when I was asked to vote to close 10 schools because the state budget was that bad. And so I don't think that we should in any way suggest that our funding challenges are over because we have local control funding formula. I think we've given our districts some resources and the ability to make local decisions, but if we really look at what we've done, it says that we're going to allow you to decide at the local level what you fund and what you don't fund, knowing full well that we haven't given you enough to fund all the things that you need to fund. I support local control, but I want us to go beyond the funding levels that we are at. And I would like to be the superintendent who champions the ballot measure that will be on the state ballot in 2020 to create a kind of Prop 13 split roll reform to make big corporations pay their fair share of property taxes so we have enough money to fund K-12 education in our state.
Great.
And there's a measure that is proposed that would generate $11 billion new dollars for education. Well, for the total state budget, about $6 billion of that would go to K-12 education. And let me just say it so you've heard me here. No one here would have to pay more taxes if you're a property owner or a senior or a small business. I don't want anyone to leave here and say that Tony Thurmond says he's going to increase your taxes. But large corporations have experienced a loophole in the law in Prop 13 that had prevented them from contributing property taxes at the level of what their properties are valued at. And it has really robbed our school districts of billions of dollars of needed revenue. And this new reform is a way to help right-size that and reconcile that. And so I say all that to say that LCFF is a great framework. But if we don't properly fund education, we will continue to get the same results that we are getting. And I'm committed to saying, let's not ask people to do more with less. Let's give them the tools that they need to make LCFF a great tool for supporting English learners and disadvantaged students and giving districts the resources they need.
That's great. I know a lot of our practitioners in the room and those that might be watching us virtually can appreciate that you know that money matters for our California public schools.
I have 2 teenage daughters. I know that money matters. They ask me every single day. They attend public school and they read about the things that I work on in the legislature, and they remind me all the time, Dad, money matters.
Yeah. Let's move from 46 to number 1.
That's right. We can, and we
can.
We
so
can.
A couple questions. We have time for some questions that came from our CUBE attendees today. Why don't you tell us, since we are on the funding conundrum, what's your position on public taxpayer money supporting private charter schools, and even the diversion of dollars from private charters or from school district schools over to public charters. And if yes, you have support for that, how do you plan to provide support to schools whose finances are reduced as a consequence of that money moving?
Well, I have co-authored legislation this year that will ban for-profit charter schools in the state of California. There are for-profit companies that own schools that have made upwards of $50 million and have been traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And when you look at the graduation rates for the students that they serve, it hovers around 36% of their graduates. And so from my standpoint, that is a misuse of public funds. And when they say public education, I think public education is just that, public education. I think no company should profit off of the backs of our kids. We should be providing an education for all 6 million of our kids. I'm proud that the governor has signed that legislation to ban for-profit charter schools in our state. Let me be clear, charter schools were created to support innovation. And of the 6 million students in our state, many of them attend a charter school. And I will work hard to support all public students wherever they attend. I will ask and insist that there's accountability, and that charter schools would follow the same accountability as traditional public schools. And that means that they follow the Brown Act, so that decisions that are made in a transparent way. If anyone on a nonprofit charter school board is earning money as a result of their relationship with that school, that should be a transparent matter that everyone in the public is allowed to know about. I've already supported legislation that says charter schools can't push kids out because they have special education needs or behavioral needs. Again, when we say public education, that means public education for all. And there are folks who've said to me, Tony, you ought to focus on the kids who demonstrate promise and potential. I reject that notion. I think all kids show promise and potential. And I think it's our responsibility to say that education is not about competition. And I think that there are forces moving in this country that want to not only privatize public education, but destroy public education. And I want to be a superintendent who stands up to President Trump and Secretary DeVos, who says there will be no privatization of public education in California, not on our watch and not during this time. We protect education. We ensure that every single California student gets a great public education wherever he or she attends.
Great, thank you. So we know always a concern or an inquiry on the minds of our practitioners has to do with testing and accountability that impacts how we do our day-to-day work in school systems. How much money do you think is spent on state testing, or how can we reduce costs and the amount of testing that impacts our students so that we can get more to the teaching and learning side? Any thoughts on that? Testing and accountability?
I've been thinking a lot about it. Look, I'll be honest, right off the top, I think that our kids are more than a test score. And I appreciate that we have measures that look at the entire school community and the entire school climate and the entire school environment to make a decision about what's happening. Having said that, I do believe that we have to have a system that allows us to compare what's happening for one 8th grader in California with an 8th grader in another state, and that there has to be some standards that give us the ability to compare student performance, about what the expectations are about what that 8th grader should know. And I think we just have to be honest and say that in California we have struggled as it relates to test scores since we've implemented the Common Core curriculum. I think we have to have honest conversations about what that is, but move away from the kind of blame that has really, people have used the word accountability to mean let's blame somebody. And I think that we should be focused on providing real solutions. I've heard from many teachers who've told me they've never had any professional development that focuses on where the new Common Core curriculum is headed, and that they're still teaching kids to memorize data and try to do well on an exam. We owe it to our educators to provide real professional development. I can't tell you how many times I've met teachers who've told me that one teacher at their school will be selected to go to a training, and they're expected to come back on their own time and do a turnaround training for the whole school. Who can do that when you're taking work home in the evenings and working during the summers? Let's be for real and say if we care about our educators getting the right development, let's provide time during the summer where we pay teachers to train on the new standards, to work with their colleagues, to plan for the year, to get their classes ready, to plan themes that they want to do together. You know, that has a cost, but there's a price for not providing that. And I think we've got to provide that level of professional development. And then we can look at everything related to the test scores. We can look at the issues around professional development and teaching and instruction. We can look at what were the conditions under which students took the test. We can look at, I've been told by teachers who say that they didn't have laptops for the students to take the exam. How do you get a score if you didn't have a computer to take the exam? And then we have to look at, you know, again, these tests, as much as we are trying to refine them, there are still biases that come with what our kids are expected to know and understand. And I'm thinking about our English learners. Some of them may know the words of what is asked on a test, but if you don't have a context for how to use that, it just may not make any sense. And I think we've got to be serious about that. That's why I'm proud that the governor signed my bill, AB 2514, last week to give hundreds of thousands of dollars to support dual language immersion programs so we can help our English learners and help others who want to acquire a second language and be global thinkers for tomorrow.
What an asset, right?
I think it's a great asset.
Yeah.
I think it's a great asset. I think we should be more focused on helping young people acquire a second language and teaching them critical thinking and helping them to work on civics as opposed to teaching to the test and asking our kids to memorize things just so we can teach to the test.
Right. Okay. Well, that's great. There was some questions actually around your stance around English learners and immersion education, and so I'm glad that through the testing accountability question, you were able to express yourself on how you feel about those two issues. My last question, Tony, in our last couple of minutes here is just if you can share with the audience today, what's your authentic why? Why do you, Tony Thurmond, want to be the next state superintendent of public instruction here in California?
When I told someone that I was going to do this, they said, well, get your head checked, and if you still want to do it, then I'll support you. You know, no one knows.
They told me that too when I took my job.
And you still did, right?
I did.
That says a lot about you as an educational leader. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Most people have no idea what this job does, and I didn't either. I love what I do in the legislature, and it has given me the opportunity to help move $1 billion into early education and make the first year of community college free and expand the free lunch program for 400,000 kids. And I really want my political legacy to be helping kids, especially kids who struggle, because that was really my own story. You know, education has been a great equalizer in my life. I was, you know, born to immigrant parents. My mom was an immigrant who came here from Panama and was a teacher in San Jose. My dad was a soldier who served in Vietnam, who I found on the internet, you know, just before my 40th birthday. My mom lost her battle to cancer when I was 6 years old, and I was raised by a cousin who lived 3,000 miles away, who I didn't know until I showed up on her doorstep, and raised in a low-income household. I was raised on the free lunch program, food stamps. I ate so much government cheese, I thought USDA was a brand name. Some of you all know what I'm talking about. You cut through that plastic, get through that box, then you can make the best grilled cheese sandwich you ever had.
It is good for grilled cheese.
That's about it. These were programs that helped my family overcome poverty, and at every step of my journey were educators who believed in me, who invested in me, they poured in me. And when I struggled, they hang in there with me, and they said that life will be better for you than it started, and they were right. I think about it all the time, how easy it would have been for me to end up in California State Prison. Instead, I ended up in the California State Assembly. I want to give that experience to 6 million kids in our state. And to those who have reminded me that I'm risking I'm in a safe seat in the legislature. I've been reelected with the highest percentage of any legislator in the last 10 years. And they say, Tony, you're risking a safe position. And I tell them, our kids are facing great risk if they don't get a great education. And so now I'm risking something too. And I'm all in for our kids. And I hope that you will be too, and that you'll give us a chance to support and serve the 6 million kids in the great state of California.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing your personal story here at the close. It's really inspiring. Let's give Tony Thurmond a big round of applause. Thank you for being here this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tony.